Hey, it's Maddie and Moses here. We are from the Pixlmob team, and we're here with Dalton Steele, who is one of the admin and creator of the real estate videography group on Facebook, and also runs a media company in Canada called Hover Media. So, welcome, Dalton. Um, how big is the real estate videography group these days?
Yeah, so the group now is just over 53,000 members. So we've grown into this awesome community and yeah, it just keeps growing and it's been a blast.
When I kind of got started into the real estate world, I feel like these Facebook groups have been really helpful for me. I see all the time. I mean, like the communities that have grown out of these groups have inspired a lot of people to start the businesses. I think it's helped a lot of people develop, figuring out pricing, figuring out customer problems. Kind of curious for you, how did this all start, and how have you seen it develop?
Yeah, sure. So I started my business in 2016, and like you're saying, the groups that were out there were an awesome resource for kind of like figuring things out and finding your way. So I was very active in the real estate photography group on Facebook. Met some cool people there, and was asking a lot of questions, and that was like really cool for helping me get started. And then the way that my group came about was, I was chatting with another member, a guy out of Florida, David Moorfield. And, one day I was like, hey, maybe we should, start a real estate video specific group. Because, people were doing video at the time, but it was still kind of new. Drones were kind of new. Gimbals were kind of new. At the time I was still shooting on like a slider, camera slider. And so there was kind of like new technology coming out and videos, a lot of real estate photographers were adding video to their offerings, and it just seemed like a really complex kind of conversation, and it felt like it needed its own space. So started up this real estate videography group, honestly not really expecting it to amount to anything, but I was just kind of in this space of like, always starting up like new little projects here and there. And this is one where I think, um, you know, timing was really on my side, and there was really a need for it at the time. And this is just one thing that just kind of stuck.
Was there anything in particular, like, I mean, sometimes those things like take off at a particular point, right? And they just kind of explode. I imagine like that didn't happen on day one. Was there anything that kind of catalyzed the growth of the group?
I think as it started to grow, I started to put more into the admin side of it, and looking for ways to create more engagement and that kind of thing. I'm not sure if there was like a turning point necessarily. I
No, like crazy post that just like got shared into oblivion or
Where it
anything.
went, no, there was no like, there was no cattle, no like post that went viral or something like that. It was really just like a slow build of people kind of like I said, there was really a need for it. So people would come in, ask questions, and the engagement just slowly kept building and building. And you know I don't even remember those kind of like early days of the group as much. It really did feel like one day I woke up and was like, wow, there's like thousands of people in here and 10,000 people in here. Is and then it was a snowball effect. So it really rapidly started building. And I'd say now we're kind of like tapering off a little bit more, but engagement is still like very high, like, something like 20 plus posts per day with, really good conversations. But no, there was no like magic moment, I guess, where it really started to take off. And I don't even think, like I said, I think it was just really like a case of good timing, and like there was a need for it. Um, like I don't think I'm some special person. What I did is the reason that became what it is. Like I think maybe there's a small part of that where once the group was like larger, and required a little bit more facilitation, and keeping on top of different problems that emerged like spam and these kind of things, to make sure that the conversation was still flowing and that there was no distractions from kind of these main topics that we cover, like, discussing gear, sharing our work, asking kind of questions about shooting, editing, the business side. And then the other stuff, it was like try to manage that. But I don't think there was anything, special about me. I'm a solo real estate photographer, and just trying my best as well. And this was just like a cool side project that just kept growing and growing until one day I woke up and was like, wow, this is a really cool community.
I love it. Yeah.
I think it was the stash.
Yeah, it might have been the stash came later. This was in recent years, so I can't credit it to that either, unfortunately. But yeah, but thank you. I'll take that.
I'm curious, did you actually start out doing real estate? Or did that kind of just happen over time? It's not, I mean, if you were starting that videography group in 2016, it's way older than I thought, to be honest. And we've seen a wave of things happen, I think, in the industry. But yeah, how did the real estate part of your business start, and what was that evolution like?
Yeah, so I was studying business, and I was very involved in like the entrepreneurship scene. So we had a student business incubator where people like go and like learn how startups work and do workshops and find like grant programs, and are like everyone's kind of like dipping their toe into entrepreneurship. So that was kind of like my core friend group. I spent a lot of time around these different entrepreneurs, and at the time I was working on a different project, and my friends were like trying to start up apps and this and that, and I met a guy by the name of Bailey Rubis. Still probably botched his last name. But Bailey was, working on luxury real estate videos, more video specific than photos. He runs Drone Hub Media, and, shooting like really high-end homes all over North America, flying around, mostly at the time between like Miami, Atlanta, Chicago, and in Toronto. So he was kind of like part of my kind of core friend group there, and we got linked up, and I was like, I got some video editing skills, and I knew he was looking to expand, just like crazy work ethic, shooting these incredible homes. And I had to do a co-op placement. So I did my co-op with Drone Hub. So I had kind of like a brief period where I was shooting some of the most high-end homes in Toronto with Drone Hub Media, homes on the Bridle Path, which is where like, that's where like Drake's house is. This is where like the celebrities and kind of wealthy Torontonians kind of gather, is like in these kind of neighborhoods. So we were shooting those types of homes and some upscale homes in the Muskokas. And, at a certain point, I like realized I really enjoy this work. And there was kind of a conversation about whether or not there was a place for me, like as an owner, and, or like kind of working into that within the company. And, it was kind of clear, especially looking back on it, it was clear that there's a bit of a disconnect there, because him and his brother have been working, very hard for multiple years at this point, and have already built like a pretty successful brand, and are now looking to like scale their team. And I was like a total beginner. But we were both like entrepreneurs at heart. So he kind of understood that, I wanted to go my own direction. So I started shooting like everyday homes in Niagara, still shoot the occasional luxury home, but just kind of wanted to pave my own path, be my own boss. And, actually just had a good catch up the other day with Bailey, and potentially about some stuff we could do. I still cover shoots for them. So, tried to be as respectful as I could in that process, not to take any other clients or step on any toes. That went pretty smoothly. And I've been doing it ever since. Started with video, and then kind of backtracked into photography and all the different add-ons to become a full service real estate media business.
What has been kind of your core service now that you've kind of rounded out your business? Video still really big part of it, or is photo kind of been a core?
Same thing. Like when I started out, I was more focusing on video, and drones were kind of becoming more popular. And videos, I feel like how I got my foot into the Niagara market, because that is what I was getting good at, like working under Drone Hub. And then at a certain point, I realized like my photos were lacking. Like they were fine, but at a certain point, like a few years in, I decided to kind of like take a closer look at my photography and started outsourcing my editing, especially outsourcing my interiors, where the window pulls now look much better, the ceilings are like nice and bright, and then kind of going in and doing my own final touches to make sure it's up to like my personal standard. And that really took my photography work to a point where I now think my photography portfolio and my photography product is actually stronger than my video. And now maybe I need to do the opposite and kind of go back to the drawing board on the video side and see what I can do to improve things there. And then, yeah, just built out like, wanted to be a full service solution. So, made sure I had a good virtual stager, made sure I have, floor plans and all these things kind of bring up my average order value. Most of my shoots are like a photo, video, drone, kind of like essential. I call it my essentials package. Most of my shoots are that, and then quite a few people will throw in a floor plan or they'll want to do a realtor intro. I charge more for that. But yeah, that's my typical shoot.
What I know, like in the U.S., we have like an FAA. You have to get registered and go through like this licensing process.
Yep.
Is that a similar thing for you? What do you have to do to operate a drone?
Yeah, so Transport Canada regulates Canada's airspace. So it's similar process here. We have like a basic exam, we have an advanced exam, which is more like an in-person demonstration. Got to get kind of your license. The rules are a little bit more lax for the sub 250 gram drones, like the DJI Mini series. They're very strategically made sure that those weigh 249. So that makes things a little more lax. And do my best to comply with all of Transport Canada's regulations, which is like a little bit nutty. In my opinion, I think it could be done a lot better. But
what are their nutty regulations?
Just the exams, for example, are like kind of insane. I mean, like the basic exam, which is like multiple choice, is based on the Canadian flight supplement, which is like a massive, like the physical thing is like
that you'll absolutely never use when you're flying a drone.
Yeah, like they're asking you questions about like, I'm like, it would make a lot more sense to me if the exam was more about like the actual rules that drone operators have to abide by and not like bizarre things about like cloud formations and like helicopter, propeller, like really bizarre stuff where I'm like, I'd say like 80 to 90% of the exam has little to nothing to do with drones. And it's like, I think that they're having a really hard time with, I mean, we could have a whole, discussion just about drone regulations, I'm sure. But, I think that they are having a hard time with getting people to, go through the proper process and get, do their exams, get their certifications and everything and follow the regulations. But I think that they overcomplicate it to a point where people are like, I can't be bothered with that. And also the enforcement is like almost non-existent. So unless you like take down a helicopter because you crashed into a helicopter or something, or you're flying over like directly over top of airports or prisons or something, then like they're just not issuing fines, to people. So they're not enforcing. So there's all these illegal flights happening on a daily basis, probably thousands of them. And they just have this small team. So I feel like if they made the process more focused on the actual drone rules so that people would educate themselves on how to operate a drone safely and just use like common sense as well, then I think more people would actually go through the proper process and it would be better for everybody. So that's kind of, that's the spark notes on my thoughts on drone regulations in Canada. But yeah.
Some similar issues, but I think you guys have one up on us. There's probably like 100% less drones shot down in Canada.
Yeah, that's true.
Angry homeowners, because you got to go like check out your firearms from the sheriff or something. It's a
Yeah,
little different.
exactly, exactly. I get the occasional kind of like nosy neighbor, and usually like I don't know, I'm kind of like a people person, and I think just visually people see me for some reason, and they just like have a hard time being mad at me. I don't know if that's, but like in person, face to face with someone, it's like you're just friendly, and it kind of like you can diffuse it pretty quick, and you tell them what you're doing, and they're like, "Oh, okay." Um, Only had the cops called on me one time. It's because
Oh,
they think you're scoping out the neighborhood or something like that, and then same thing. You start talking with the police, and they're like, "Oh, cool," and they're like asking you,
Can
"Oh,
I fly
how
it?
fast? Yeah, how fast does that thing fly?" And like start like asking you the typical drone questions. But when I can, I'll try to like take off from the backyard or something, because it's like if they don't see you out there with a controller, then they're less likely to approach you and start, but yeah, as far as I haven't had anyone threaten to shoot down my drone or anything. I imagine that the photographers who are out in like Texas, this might be like a legitimate concern for them about their drone getting downed by a shotgun spray. But yeah, it's a
I
different
I think you're
environment.
totally right about the testing problems. Like if you're
Yeah.
growing a team, which we have, that's one of the hardest steps. Like is getting people to get their licenses. Sometimes people taking it 3 or 4 times. It's expensive,
Yep.
and it's mostly irrelevant. But the thing is like it's an opportunity. It should be an opportunity to get people actually trained on drone
Yeah.
safety. And the things that should be the most obvious, like, should just be drilled into your head. But it's like you're learning weather patterns and all this
Yeah.
other stuff, which you'll never use, or it's just built into the app, to let you know like you're coming to an altitude limit or don't take off here or whatever.
Yeah.
But general safety stuff, like there's the other day, I mean, literally this week, I saw this guy. I was pulling into this uh, a major highway, like on ramp, and there was a drone floating 25 feet above the highway. I'm
Yeah.
like, this is nuts.
Yeah.
Above moving cars. But it's like people can just go to Best Buy, buy a thing, and you're off to the races. And the licensing is so hard that there'd be no reason why you wouldn't. Why would you do that? Like unless you absolutely had to.
Yeah, I think it could be done better, but yeah, like I said, I think it's just like a small team, that's overseeing all of the drone operations for the entire country in both cases. Like I can't imagine the drone department at the FAA is like more than like 20 people or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's a total guess. I could be totally wrong, but
I don't believe it even has an enforcement arm. It's
right.
just regular.
Yeah, like I know that Transport Canada's like fines, they used to post all of them publicly. And I was like, "Oh,
oh,
interesting. They're issuing like 3 fines a month for like the entire country." And it was like none of them were even in my province. It's like
That's
that
better
yeah,
is
than the United States.
right. And
Like,
now they don't post them. So I can only assume that they're still not really enforcing it. And the specific example that I'm thinking of is when the Toronto Raptors had like their big win, and there was like a parade in the streets in Toronto, and some guy flew his drone like super low over the crowd and got some crazy footage. He was like boasting about it publicly, that it was his footage on social media, and everyone knew that it was on the Transport Canada's radar and that they were aware of it, and they still didn't issue him a fine. And it kind of like was a little
what?
bit of it's a bit of a slap in the face to the people who do take the time to go through the process, which is kind of overwhelming and confusing. And and then there's all these other rules online, like you'll hear people talking about the regulations, but it's like, oh, those are the FAA's rules, and so there's some confusion across borders in terms of the rules.
yeah.
So it's kind of a slap in the face to people who are taking the time to do things properly, and I think they eventually did slap them with a fine, but it was after this kind of like backlash, right? So yeah.
It's really frustrating though. Like with our pilots, if you go through the trouble of taking this largely irrelevant test
Mm.
that you had to study for in order to be able to fly it right, and then there's some idiot hobbyist charging to fly their drone and nobody cares and nobody's going to hold them accountable for it, like, why did you bother to do the right thing?
Yeah.
So it's a little frustrating when things are created and then not enforced in a way that's helpful to the professionals. Because I mean, there are good reasons to have licenses, but many of them just have antiquated processes that have been adopted.
Yeah.
They need to be updated, just like you're talking about.
Yeah. Like many things though, but it's definitely
Yeah,
frustrating.
it's
Yeah.
actually exactly. I've only have any knowledge of two different licenses, but it's almost exactly the same in real estate. I'd say 80+% of the stuff you learn to get a real estate license has little to do with what you do in actually selling real estate whatsoever.
Yeah.
And the 20% just has to do with like the legal relationships and how you're a fiduciary for the customer. That's actually relevant. But everything else you have to learn from the brokerage. So it's like, who are we keeping out of this that is helpful to have actual professionals in it? It doesn't seem to do what it was intended to do in either case.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. To be honest, I haven't thought about this in a while, like on the drone side of things. I haven't actually thought about it in quite a while.
Drones obviously have become like a staple for our industry. Like, they're used for photos, obviously, but I feel like video in particular with aerials is like such a value add. Photos, I don't know, like I kind of get why you'd use them. Sometimes it helps add context, but rarely is it like a pretty photo. Like sometimes you want to see context to a city nearby or off in the horizon, or you're near the mountains, or sometimes you're showing like proximity to the grocery store or the mall or
Yep.
whatever. But I feel like video, it's like another level. And particularly if you're shooting luxury, videos in this long enough now where you've kind of seen shifts over time. 2016, I don't think everyone had a drone. I feel like that's super commonplace now. But like, maybe talk to us about kind of how you've seen that change, and particularly like how video aerials have impacted, and when you choose to use them or when you don't.
Yeah, so like you said, drones have been kind of like a huge value add for real estate media. Um, just kind of recapping what you said, there's kind of like your lower angle shots, which I think are nice to show off the property, the yard. Um, I find actually that there's a lot of homes, especially like I said, I shoot a lot of like everyday homes, and especially at that price point, there are sometimes you're going for like that main front shot of a house and they just have like a bunch of like trees or bushes and it's really full that time of year, and there's just like these visual obstructions where you can't really get like a nice like main shot. And I find that like sometimes if you're 20 feet up in the air, you're not even that high with the drone, you can get kind of like a nice angle that shows the front of the home kind of above these kind of visual obstructions, especially with backyards. Sometimes the backyard is just like an empty lot, right? But sometimes it's kind of broken up into different spaces. Like there's a pool with a fence and there's big bushes, and there's like a lot of privacy, which is great. But if you're standing in the corner of the yard trying to take like a nice wide shot of the full yard, you can't get a full shot. It's kind of like broken up. You got to shoot it in individual spaces. And like a really low angle drone shot can give you like a nice perspective of the backyard. So I really like drone shots for that kind of thing. And then you pull up a little higher, you're getting like show the lot. Maybe you add some lot lines in post, so they can really see the size and the shape of the property. And then you kind of pull up a little higher, and now you're getting like the street and showing off the neighborhood. Maybe it's like, we have in Niagara, we have Lake Ontario to the north, and to the south of us, we have Lake Erie. So there's properties that are near the water or right on the water. So drones are great for that kind of thing. We'll fly out way over the lake, turn around, and get video shots kind of like coming in, which is like a really great intro shot. Maybe you're like looking at the water and panning up as you fly in towards land. So drones like provide like all kinds of different value, right? Like you're mentioning like proximity to shopping and things like that. Basically, anytime I fly a drone, I'll kind of do a little 360 visual inspection and be like, oh, there's like a nice little school just down the road, or there's a nice little park. And as long as it's kind of within range and I have enough battery life, then I'll fly over there and get like a nice little shot of the park. little community features and things like that. Even if the client doesn't ask, that's something that I just always do, because they're like, it's a nice little surprise when they get their listing, and maybe they put in the description that it's walking distance from a nice elementary school. So I think it's good to get those kind of shots, and drones make all of this stuff possible, and it's very cost effective for us too as real estate photographers. With video, same thing. It just adds a unique perspective that kind of takes our videos to the next level. And almost every property I shoot, we're doing drone, and it's rare that I find that I would recommend that we don't do drone, unless there's like really like a lot of construction nearby and that kind of thing. And the rest of the lots around it are just like a mess or something like that. But for the most part, I find that there's almost always some value that you can get out of drones. Sometimes a realtor will even, they'll leave drone off of their shoot because they think, oh, for whatever reason, they don't think it'll show well from the air. But then, like I said, you'll get there and you'll realize that some low angle shot of the property is like actually going to be the best shot in the video. And at that point, I'll kind of explain to them the value, and a lot of times they will, add it onto the shoot. So drones have become kind of like a must-have tool for real estate media professionals. And, at the price point that you can get into drones now, with like a DJI Mini 2, shoots 4K video and great battery life, and is a nimble little drone. And you can get into it now with, not a huge investment. Like, you don't need to buy the new Mavic 4 Pro with the creator bundle and spend like thousands and thousands of dollars to get high quality drone footage. So I feel like even a total beginner should be thinking about adding a drone to their kit.
Yeah, in our area, from the real estate side of the world, if I see a property that looks too good to be true and there aren't drone anything showing the context of the property, it's almost like the property that doesn't have like a disclosure filled out, and you're like, well, what are you not showing me?
Right.
Like, it's
What are you
becoming
hiding?
so common that if you don't have those contextual shots, I think it's almost a detractor, where people coming into the property wondering what's wrong with the space.
Mhm.
Like, I was sending property to my parents. They're thinking about moving down toward me.
Mhm.
And it was exactly that situation. It was a beautiful, like 10-acre parcel for like $750,000 kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Like, it was too good to be true. And I knew it. And as soon as I went into aerials, like, there's just very stark differences from that property to like industrial and trailers and like all around it.
Right.
And you're like, okay, well, I know
That
why it
makes
doesn't have drone
sense.
shots, but I also figured out this wasn't probably the property for them because it didn't have drone shots. So it's
Yeah.
like, it's interesting nowadays.
No, and that's actually an interesting point. That was one thing that I thought of too, is we have a lot of rural properties around here too. It's not all like residential neighborhoods. So when you're shooting a rural property, drone is pretty much a must as well, to show off any acreage. Like, you really need that perspective. But actually, what's interesting about what you just said is, I think, like, an interesting conversation in itself, which is, it's also our job to, it's our job to make a property look nice, but it's also kind of our job to make sure that a house is like properly represented. Last week, this is a problem that every real estate photographer will run into at some point or another, is, really short notice cancellations. So I guess what I've done is, I try to be a little bit lax about my cancellation policy, where, if someone cancels within a couple days notice, their regular client, it's no issue. And honestly, oftentimes I'm able to fill that time slot on a short notice. Or I just have a little bit of a breather and I can use that time to catch up on other things. There's always more to do. So I feel like I'm kind of helping my client experience by making the scheduling and rescheduling process a little bit flexible. Like you can hear the stress in their voice or in just in the tone of their messages and how apologetic they are sometimes when they need to reschedule because of something that is, pretty much out of their hands with the homeowner not being ready or whatever it is. So I'm always like very like no problem at all. Let me help you. We'll find a new time. Or if they had to cancel it altogether because the listing fell through, no problem. But something I ran into just the other week was, I show up to a shoot, full day, 4 listings. Some of those were pretty big packages. And one of my shoots, I get to the door, knock on the door, no answer, message the realtor, hey, I'm here. There's a lockbox. Am I shooting it vacant? And they said, oh, over the weekend, the homeowner decided that they're not ready to list. They're not going to go ahead with listing. It didn't dawn on me to tell you. And I was like, oh, great, So I said, okay. I said, no problem. Accidents happen. But because it is kind of like, a harder conversation, I decided like I better pick up the phone because when you have to have a hard conversation with a client, it is easy for tone to get misconstrued and for things to get a lot of miscommunication happens in text when you start to get on touchy subjects. So that's what I've learned in my experience. So I picked up the phone, give them a call. Hey, no problem. It happens. But because I like drove out here to the shoot and no one was here and it's a last minute cancellation, I explained to him, like, if you let me know a couple days ago or even yesterday or even this morning, like I'm maybe a little too lax. Anything but I show up to the door and, that's my time and,
Fuel.
Yeah, even travel costs, fuel and wear and tear and all that. But it's more so about like making sure that my clients are respecting my time and everything. So I told them like, no problem, accidents happen, but there will be like a cancellation fee for this job because this is like prime shooting hours in the busiest time of year. And, and I didn't tell them this, but like there needs to be a little bit of pain, as well. Otherwise they, to make sure that it doesn't happen again in the future and for other clients to prevent that. And he started like negotiating with me, like you could hear the tone shift immediately. And this is someone that I've done only a couple shoots with, but just like super positive energy, like really friendly. And so it really caught me off guard. And I'm kind of going through like full like spring market rush, very like kind of burnt out a couple times. And so this like, pretty run of the mill problem was like kind of shook me up actually more than I expected, where he's trying to negotiate my fee and then kind of like loosely implied, he's like, well, I'll bring you more business, and kind of started to loosely imply that he'll go elsewhere if I send him a cancellation fee. And so that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I was like, and then when I kind of cooled down like a day or two later, I was like, okay, well, what could I do to prevent this from happening in the future? And what could I have done better to make sure that this didn't happen? And it's like, turns out, I could be having, an upfront conversation with all of my clients about expectations and what happens, like, because there was no previous conversation about a cancellation fee. I have been in business for like almost 9 years coming up on August, and I've grown a lot as a solo photographer. And I'm like really happy with where revenue is at and how, this full service of offerings that I've put out now. But like happy with my portfolio, all these different things that I'm proud of, but there's still, an overwhelming number of problems within the business and within my systems. And it's like everywhere I look, I still see room for improvement. So on one hand, that is like kind of disheartening that there's all these ways that things can go wrong, but I'm like, well, I'm doing well right now. And there's still all this room for improvement. So that's the other kind of way to look at the situation. So, that particular case, I've tried to smooth things over with this client, even though I feel like, I definitely wasn't in the wrong necessarily, but I'm like, hey, there's definitely things that I could have done better to prevent this problem in the future. And now I'm going to implement those changes into my business. And, I think that is just kind of like part of the game, is we're just, as entrepreneurs, as small business owners, we're just constantly looking for these pain points where we can improve things and make the job less stressful for ourselves and for our clients, prevent problems before they happen, and help us make more money. And like I said, everywhere I look, I just see room for improvement. So on that side of things, it's like kind of exciting that there's still room to grow. Like, we're definitely haven't reached that ceiling yet. These things happen all the time, and we're just putting out fires some days. So yeah. And actually, just like one more kind of final thought on that. I know that there's a lot of people, and people like to talk about the success stories of when people kind of like find this point really quickly. Actually, there's like a diagram, like an entrepreneurship diagram. Maybe it's like more of a startup thing. You guys may have seen it, where it's like the life cycle of a startup, and there's this big, like, you're kind of excited at the beginning, and then really early on, you kind of like hit this giant like trough. They call it the trough of sorrow. And then eventually you kind of start figuring things out, and you get your systems in place, and you start climbing out of the trough of sorrow, and then you're growing, and then you're kind of like less stressed, and you get to just like enjoy the ride. And I feel like for me, the trough of sorrow felt like a really long time. And some people I know kind of like get into the business and like hit like 10K revenue within like 6 months or a year, and that's great. And you can do that on your own, or maybe you're like, find a course or a program and you follow it to the letter, and you skip through all of these mistakes instead of making them yourself. And some people are able to kind of like hit that point and climb out of the trough of sorrow within 6 to 12 months or a couple of years. And I think it's also like, for me, I know it took a much longer time to kind of get to this point where things started to click and feel good about the business. And then even then, we're still just always like learning and growing. So there's always weeks where we just feel like throwing in the towel. There's these like kind of days or even weeks where things are really rough, and you're like, do I really want to be doing this? And there's pros and cons to this business and being self-employed or running a small team. But I think for the people that are kind of in the trough of sorrow, it's like, stick with it, give it time, keep working on, your systems and problem solving, and like give yourself a break, because it doesn't just like happen in a year for everybody. Like, sometimes it takes time, and it's like, it's worth it kind of when you get to that point.
Obviously, as an admin for the real estate videography group, you see a lot of the questions that pop up time and time again. What are those questions, or maybe if you pick a question that you see, and like, what's maybe an easy answer that you've seen, would solve problems for a lot of people? It just keeps coming up.
Whether you're a small team, or especially for like the solo photographer, solo media people, I think that giving up, that sense of control over the editing is a really difficult hurdle to get over, because we're like business people, but a lot of us come from more of a creative backgrounds. Some of us are more both, but we really want that kind of control over quality, and a lot of us are kind of like perfectionists by nature. And I think it takes a long time for a lot of people, and was my experience too, to kind of like give up that perfectionist mindset. And a lot of people come to the group and they're just like experiencing burnout, or they're trying to find editors and they're not happy with the results that they're getting from the editors they are trying. And one of the kind of like major things that I implemented, it took me a long time to realize, was it doesn't need to be perfect. And at PMRE, when I went to PMRE, one of the speakers on stage kind of like said a couple of things that really made me realize that I need to make that leap. And when I did, I felt so much better, because it frees up my evening so much. And it took me a long time to kind of take that step, I guess, to find an editor. And beyond that, I know that people will post in the group about the results they're getting from editors. So I think that my advice there, and I think the best advice is like a conversation around expectations. You need to be like actively communicating with your editors. You need to try out multiple different editors and find the right fit. And then you need to train them on your style and all these specific things that you're looking for. And then still expect that they're not going to be perfect every time, and that you need to kind of like go in yourself and do some final touches, which I do on every shoot still. I think a lot of people think that, outsourcing will just be like a magical solution, but it is just like a tool. So that's something that I see kind of a recurring conversation for more established people, but I think it's a necessary step if you want to build a profitable business or grow an agency, to offload your editing for photo and video. And video is almost harder, in my opinion. It's really difficult to find a good video editor, but that's like one of the cool things that's happening in the group is, we have all these editors, and if someone makes a post that they're looking for an editor, they'll get 20 comments on there. And having you guys kind of as our flagship sponsor, I think is great. Like, I use the platform, and I think a lot of the problems surrounding editing are solved by having a proper marketplace and a proper ordering system. The payments, like it kind of touches on a lot of the pain points from outsourcing, if you do it through like the proper channels.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And also thanks so much for the work you do. I know it's really a thankless job. And you have to deal with a lot of chaos sometimes, and politics and who knows what, behind the scenes of managing a group that big and a lot of different ideas. So thanks for doing that and making that really a free resource to an entire community. So really appreciate it. And thanks for your time, for being here talking with us today.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, always good to see you guys. And I will say it's not a totally thankless job. I see a lot of like really positive posts and the appreciation for like, the group and what, Chris and Kripa are doing on the moderation side. Those guys like are in there kind of like keeping the peace, deleting spam and that kind of stuff. So I got to give a shout out to them too. But occasionally we'll get some messages or have a conversation with someone about like how much the group has helped them when they were starting the business or getting through some like tough times or whatever it is. And I just love seeing, people posting videos that they're super stoked about, when they're posting like their best work and they're getting lots of positive feedback on it. Like that is kind of, that's the best feeling in running the group. And there's when you get this many people together in one room, this is what I've been saying recently, you get this many people together in one room, there's always going to be, some amount of conflicting opinions and ideas. But I try to kind of just like manage those conversations. And, I think that is also part of what makes the group so good, is we got all these different people, lots of big personalities and industry leaders, and everyone from people who are thinking about getting into the business to total beginners to some of, if not the biggest teams in the industry. So that's what I think makes the group so cool. And it's been a lot of fun up to this point, and I'm excited for the road ahead, and appreciate you guys again and for having me on here today for a chat. And yeah, hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely.